Yo, what is going on, guys? Jack here, and welcome to the fourth and final part of the best Wonderkids in Football Manager 2015. The series has been received really well. Thank you so much for watching it. Today I have for you guys the final part. We're doing the midfielders. I have 57 of the best young midfielders in Football Manager 2015. There's a lot more midfielders than any other position in Football Manager 2015 because obviously it encompasses defensive midfielders and attacking midfielders. As a result, there's just far too many to go through. So rather than go through every single one of these, I'm going to draw your attention to a few who are probably the better buys to get, in my opinion. So I guess the first one I'm going to start with is this guy, Bilal Cheikh. And he's a very good player. He's 16 at the start of the game. You can see here he's got pretty solid attributes. He has played 7 games for 20's second team last year. This year he is 16, so he's old enough to be in the game. And you can actually approach him on a free contract at the start of the game. You can approach him and pay compensation because he's on a youth contract. I believe the compensation is in the region of £3.5 million. But for a player of his quality with his potential, it's a pretty good bargain to get at the start of any save. The next player who I kind of tell you to go and get on any save you can is this guy, Pavel Soviet Ski. The reason for this guy is he is Belarusian. His contract runs out in December of 2014, which means you can actually approach him on a pre-contract to join you 6 months into any save on a free contract, and he has absolutely tiny wages. He's an incredible player. The only downside is he might struggle to get a work permit in England. However, you are able to just loan him out, and because he plays for Belarus's national team, he'll eventually rack up enough international appearances to join you and have a work permit. So he's an absolutely fantastic buy. As I mentioned, you can get him in and he'll pretty much join any Premier League team for under £5,000 a week, which is an absolutely incredible deal. Koretski is another very good player. This guy is on loan from Inter at the start of the game, but you can actually pick him up second season on loan. Very often he gets loan listed, so he's a good player to go in for second season into your game. If you're looking for a young kind of deep line playmaker, he is definitely a player who I'd kind of recommend you look out for. Another player who I highly recommend is Lucas Romero. He was a beast last year in FM. He is as good as he was last year. You can pick him up for around £6 to £7 million at the start of the game. Just an incredible midfielder. He can play so many roles. Not necessarily the best going forward in terms of his attacking attributes. His finishing kind of lets him down, but his off the ball and composure are not bad at all. But it makes him a great deeper midfielder, be it as a centre mid, a regista, a deep line playmaker, ball and midfielder. He's kind of a master of all trades, and because he's 20, you've still got a little bit of time to really shape exactly how you want him to play in your team. If you wanted to play a more defensive role, he's very adaptable for you to train his core defensive attributes. On the flip side, if you wanted to make him a bit more of a playmaker, you could simply focus on his passing. You kind of get the idea. He's a very good player, incredible mentals as well, and the 16 natural fitness is also very useful if you're going to be playing a lot of first team football kind of in European campaigns. Another player who I really like is Serge. I picked him up a few years ago on FM. In fact, I think I had him on my FC United and Manchester 2013 save. But he's a pretty nice little player. He plays for Barcelona's B team. He is quite expensive though, and you can get better value for money from players like Romero. But he's a player who holds, I guess, a spot deep in my heart somewhere because he's kind of a player who I've had in FM a fair bit. Another player who I really like is Josh Murphy, who plays for Norwich. He's a very good player. Very often he ends up at teams like Man City. But he's an incredible winger with really good pace. His mentals aren't the best, and that's probably the thing that lets him down. But in terms of as a speedy player with a lot of potential, he's certainly got that. He broke into the Norwich first team last year in the Premier League, and he's a player who this year in FM it kind of has a lot of potential to go on to greater things. You've also got a few, I guess, the obvious candidates in players like James Ward-Prowse, who forever have been good players in FM. He is, again, a very solid player indeed. Again, a player a bit like Romero, who's better playing perhaps a deeper role in the team. Players like Draxler as well, always solid players. But now we're getting to the more expensive end of things, where you're going to be spending big money to get these players. You've got players like Januzaj. Coutinho's very good this year. Liverpool, I've seen him develop very well. You can see his attributes here, great vision, good mental stats as well. And then you've got players like, obviously, Januzaj, who isn't quite as good as he was last year, I don't think, in terms of potential. He's still a very good player nevertheless. Raheem Sterling, another player who obviously had a really, really good season last year at Liverpool. He has been given a big buff this year in FM. And then, of course, kind of the gem of any Football Manager team, if you're looking for that young midfielder, Paul Pogba is the best player in the game, in my opinion. He's incredible. Such a well-rounded off player at only 21. Bow-footed, French, not on the biggest wages, so he's quite easy to pry away from Juve if, and it's a big if you can afford his transfer fee. I don't actually know how much they want for him. It might be a ludicrous amount, but he's certainly a player to keep an eye out on, because I've seen him move on in a few saves and go kind of away from Juventus. So it is possible to sign him, and he is an absolutely incredible talent. Just a reminder, if you want to load up a database, because I didn't, or load up a shortlist, the link's down below to download this midfielder shortlist. You just go to the load shortlist button here, and you can load up the shortlist and load it into your game, so you'll be able to see it in this kind of format. The last player I mentioned is Koretski. He's a very good German player. He's actually out for a long time at the start of the game. He's naturally a defensive midfielder. I've actually seen him develop into a really, really good shadow striker, or if you really want to get ambitious, you might be able to make him into a pretty decent striker, because he's got really good aerial ability. But anyway, as I mentioned, there's 57 players here. I really can't show every single one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go forward. We'll look at some of the ones who best developed in the example that I have. I'm also going to touch upon players who I really bigged up, players like Soviet Ski and Romero, to show you how good they can become. So I'll join you guys in a second. Okay guys, so we are now in the future. 2021 is the year. Immediately you'll notice there are 2 players missing off the shortlist. The reason for that being is in this example, kind of to scout the players and show you a little bit more about them. I became manager of Liverpool. Coutinho and Sterling play for Liverpool still. So anyway, this is a list of the players who were on the list. I'm going to go through some of the big players at the top to begin with. So Januzaj was the most highly recommended player to me by my assistant. Obviously that does have an element of error, but you can see in this save, he's improved a lot. He's a very, very good player, and he's currently still playing for Manchester United. Other players here, Mario Götze, no real surprises there. He's a very good player in Football Manager. You guys know about these. So anyway, let's move on to some of the players I mentioned earlier. So we'll start off with Pogba, who I mentioned is kind of the big man on campus, the guy to keep an eye out on. And as you can see here, he's actually joining PSG on a Bosman. But he's developed again on this save, and he's absolutely incredible. Such a well-rounded centre midfielder. The next player I'll show you is Lucas Romero, who I mentioned as being the bargain buyer, one of the players who I'd go and sign at the start of any save where you have £6 to £7 million to spend. You can see him here playing for Manchester City. He's been at the club for quite some time now. City picked him up for £4.9 million, and you can see he's been a staple of their first team ever since, and absolutely unreal buy. The player who, out of all these, I'd kind of tell you to go and get if you can. Other players who I mentioned, Soviet Ski, the player who you can get on a free at the start of the game. He's at Chelsea on this example. He's got a work permit. He's playing regularly in the Belarus team. You can see him there. He's developed into a really, really good left winger. And you can see Chelsea bought him for £22 million after he was purchased 2 years earlier for just £1.3 million. So that's an incredible bit of business by the French side, but that is him. So one of the players who I'd say, if you've got £2,000 in the wages, just buy him for the sakes of buying him, because he's always going to be good. Ould Cheikh is another very good player. You can see here he is proven himself, and he's gone to Juventus, a player you can pick up for £3.5 million at the start of any save. You can see here in the end Juventus had to pay £10 million to get him, but he's an incredible player. Yuri Tielemans is another player who I've seen do very, very well this year in FM. Looking at his technical attributes, you can see them here. He's a very good midfielder. I think he's at Anderlecht at the start of the game, and you can get him for a pretty decent price. City here paid £13.5 million. He's not had the best career at City, but you can see when he was at Anderlecht as a regular starter, he really did play well. I believe he's the youngest ever Belgian player to play in the Champions League or something. Certainly one who you might want to consider getting if you have the opportunity. I mentioned Serge Sunbae. He's broken into the Barcelona first team, a player who looked a little underwhelming when I first showed him, but you can see here he has improved, and he is a very well-rounded off kind of creative midfielder. Not the fastest and not the best in the air, but kind of if you're looking for that non-athletic kind of centre mid player who's going to dictate the play, he's very good. Josh Murphy, who I drew your attention to, the Norwich player, has ended up at Chelsea in this example. You can see his attributes here. He's developed into a very good little player, and he was signed for £14.5 million from Chelsea. So clearly Chelsea kind of rated him as a player. But he is very, very good. Looking on the kind of cheaper end of the spectrum, obviously we are a little way into the save, and some of these cheaper players aren't in reality that cheap at all. But you have got players like Kellen Ovitch, who was a very good player last year. I believe Barcelona picked him up in the summer. You can see his attributes here. He's a pretty nice little player. His contract runs out in 2 years, so he has a pretty decent low value, really, all things considering. But yeah, that's going to wrap things up for this series, guys, on the kind of shortlists for the 4 different positions. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'm going to probably do some more videos when the database comes out and I have some more concrete stats in terms of about some of these younger players. I also am contemplating doing a top 5 kind of, or top 10 series where I kind of do top 10 best young players in my opinion. So obviously I've given you a very brief overview of over 100 players, but I wouldn't mind getting into the nitty-gritty details with a few other players from a very specific kind of list of players who I particularly rate, even though I've given you quite a lot of my hot tips here. So let me know what you think of that series idea. If you have found this series useful, smash the like button. I do really appreciate it. If you're new to my channel and you want to see some more Football Manager 2015 videos, subscribe. You'll get notified whenever a new video is coming your way. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching. Your viewership, as always, is really appreciated. And hopefully I'll join you guys on the next video.